Tycoon took his mistress on vacation, but his wife's news ended up ruining his trip. The sun rose over the San Francisco skyline, casting golden light across the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ethan's penthouse office. He stood there, his sharp suit immaculate, staring at the city that bowed to his name. But beneath the surface of this seemingly untouchable tycoon was a man weighed down by the very empire he had created. "Another day, another dollar," muttered Ethan under his breath as he scrolled through emails on his phone. His fingers moved quickly, dismissing meeting requests, approving multimillion-dollar deals, and ignoring personal messages from Claire, his wife of 15 years. Her texts were always brief, almost formal now. "Ethan, we need to talk." Or, "When will you be home?" He sighed, tossing the phone onto his desk. The weight of her words lingered in his mind like an unwelcome shadow. They hadn't shared a real conversation in months or maybe years. Their marriage had become transactional, two people sharing a life out of habit rather than love. A knock interrupted his thoughts. It was Mia, his executive assistant, stepping into the room with a folder in hand. She wore a sleek black dress that hugged her frame perfectly, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. Her presence commanded attention, though she tried to appear demure. "Mr. Carter, I have those reports you asked for," she said, placing the folder gently on his desk. Her voice was smooth, laced with just enough warmth to make it inviting. Ethan glanced up, taking in her confident posture. There was something about her. Her ambition mirrored his own, her hunger for success palpable. Over the past year, their professional relationship had blurred into something more intimate. Secret dinners, stolen moments in hotel rooms, late-night phone calls. They all added up to a bond that neither could deny but both knew was wrong. "You've been working late again," Ethan said, leaning back in his chair. His tone softened when he spoke to her, losing the edge it carried in board meetings or negotiations. "It's part of the job," Mia replied with a faint smile, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of vulnerability. "But sometimes I wonder if it's worth it." Her words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Was she talking about the work, or the tangled web they'd woven together? Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned his gaze back toward the window, watching the city pulse with life below. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine what it would feel like to step away from it all, to leave behind the relentless pressure of being Ethan Carter, CEO of one of California's largest real estate firms. But then reality snapped back into focus. This empire wasn't just his livelihood. It was his identity. And Mia, well, she was a distraction, wasn't she? A beautiful, intoxicating distraction that made him forget, for fleeting moments, the emptiness waiting at home. As Mia left the room, closing the door quietly behind her, Ethan felt a pang of guilt twist in his chest. He picked up his phone again, scrolling past Claire's unread messages. Each one felt like a stone added to the growing burden on his shoulders. What kind of man had he become? The question haunted him, even as he buried himself deeper in work, avoiding the truth he feared facing. "Ethan, I'm serious. We can't keep ignoring this. Call me when you're done playing CEO." The words stung, though Ethan tried to brush them off as he always did. But today, something about her tone felt different, sharper, more urgent. For the first time in months, he actually considered calling her back. Instead, he shoved the thought aside and grabbed his jacket, heading out of the office. Later that evening, Ethan found himself sitting across from Claire at their dining table. A rare occurrence these days. The room was dimly lit, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the awkward silence between them. Claire sat with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable but tense. She hadn't touched her dinner, and neither had Ethan. "You wanted to talk," Ethan said finally, his voice low and measured. "So talk." Claire looked up, her eyes locking onto his with a mixture of hurt and frustration. "Do you even care anymore, Ethan? About us? About anything other than your company?" Her question hit him like a punch to the gut, but he masked his discomfort with defensiveness. "Of course I care. You think I don't know what's going on here? I've been working myself to the bone so we can have everything we need. Isn't that enough?" No, it's not enough. Claire shot back, her voice rising slightly. Money doesn't fix everything, Ethan. It doesn't fix us. Do you even remember the last time we went out together? Or laughed about something stupid? Or just talked without arguing? Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. The truth was, he didn't remember. His mind raced, searching for some memory to cling to. But all he could see were late nights at the office, missed anniversaries, and promises broken because he was too busy building an empire. I'm tired, Claire continued, her voice softer now, trembling with emotion. I'm tired of feeling invisible, of being second place to your work, to... She hesitated, biting her lip as if debating whether to say what was really on her mind. To what? Ethan asked sharply, though deep down he already knew the answer. To whoever she is, Claire whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. Don't insult my intelligence, Ethan. I've seen the way you look at your phone when you think I'm not watching. I've heard the hushed conversations, the excuses. I may not know who she is, but I know she exists. The accusation hung in the air like a storm cloud, suffocating the little oxygen left in the room. Ethan felt his chest tighten, guilt and shame warring within him. He wanted to deny it, to tell her she was wrong. But how? Could he? Every word she said was true. Claire, he began, his voice cracking under the weight of his emotions. I don't know what to say. That's the problem, isn't it? Claire replied bitterly, wiping away a tear. You never do. And honestly, Ethan, I don't think I believe you anymore when you try. The finality in her tone struck him harder than any argument they'd ever had. For years, Claire had been the steady force in his life, the one person who believed in him even when he doubted himself. Now, sitting across from her, he realized how much damage he'd done. Not just to their marriage, but to the woman who had once loved him unconditionally. I'll make it right, Ethan said suddenly, desperation creeping into his voice. Whatever it takes, I'll fix this. I promise. But Claire simply shook her head, her gaze distant now. Promises are cheap, Ethan. Actions matter. And until you're ready to show me that I'm still your priority, not your business, not whoever she is, then there's nothing left to say. With that, she stood up and walked out of the room, leaving Ethan alone at the table. The weight of her words pressed down on him like a lead blanket, making it hard to breathe. He stared at the untouched plates of food, the flickering candlelight casting shadows on the walls. For the first time in years, Ethan allowed himself to feel the full extent of what he'd lost, or was about to lose. The cracks in their marriage weren't just surface level. They ran deep, threatening to shatter everything he'd taken for granted. And yet, as much as he wanted to blame Claire for giving up too easily, he knew the fault lay squarely with him. He had built his empire brick by brick, sacrificing everything along the way, including the love of the woman who had stood by him through it all. As he sat there in the quiet, hollow emptiness of their home, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was running out of time to repair what he'd broken. But where did he even begin? As he settled into his chair, the faint scent of Mia's perfume lingered in the air, a reminder of their last meeting. It made his stomach churn with guilt. He hadn't planned to see her today, but fate seemed determined to push him further into the chaos he'd created. Ethan, Mia's voice broke through his thoughts as she entered his office without knocking. She carried a tablet in one hand, her expression calm but tinged with curiosity. You look like you didn't sleep. Ethan glanced up at her, his jaw tightening. Does it matter? Mia hesitated, then closed the door behind her. The soft click echoed in the spacious room, amplifying the tension between them. She approached his desk slowly, placing the tablet down before leaning against the edge. Her proximity was both comforting and suffocating. You've been distant lately, she said softly, studying him with those piercing eyes of hers. Is everything okay? Ethan leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his face. He wanted to tell her that nothing was okay, that his marriage was hanging by a thread, that every glance at her reminded him of the betrayal eating away at his conscience. But instead he forced a weak smile. It's work, he lied. Just Too much on my plate. Mia tilted her head, clearly unconvinced. It's more than that. I can feel it. You've been avoiding me. Her words hit close to the truth, and Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Avoidance had become his default mechanism these days. Avoiding Claire's calls, avoiding Mia's questions, avoiding the mirror that reflected the man he barely recognized anymore. I'm not avoiding you, he muttered, though even to his own ears, the denial sounded hollow. Things are just complicated right now. Complicated how? Mia pressed, her tone sharpening slightly. Are we still doing this, Ethan? Or am I wasting my time? The directness of her question caught him off guard. For months, their relationship, or whatever it was, had thrived on ambiguity. Neither of them had ever put a label on it, choosing instead to live in the gray area where emotions were messy but consequences could be ignored. But now, standing there in his office, Mia's patience seemed to be wearing thin. What do you want me to say, Mia? Ethan snapped, his frustration bubbling to the surface. That I'm married? That I have responsibilities? That I never should have let this happen in the first place? Mia flinched at his outburst, but she didn't back down. Instead, she crossed her arms, her gaze unwavering. So what are you saying? That this is all my fault? That I'm the bad guy here? No, Ethan exclaimed, standing abruptly. His chair scraped against the floor, the sound sharp and jarring. I'm not blaming you. I'm blaming myself for being selfish, for thinking I could have it all without losing anything. But I am losing things, Mia. Everything I thought I cared about is slipping through my fingers, and I don't know how to stop it. His voice cracked under the weight of his confession, raw emotion spilling out in a way he hadn't allowed himself to express in years. For a moment, the two of them stood frozen, the air thick with unspoken truths. Mia broke the silence first, her voice softer now. Then maybe it's time to choose, Ethan. You can't keep living in the middle of nowhere, pretending everything's fine when it's not. Either you fight for your marriage, or... She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Or what? Ethan asked bitterly. Or I run away with you and hope it fixes everything. Newsflash, Mia, it won't. This isn't some fairy tale where we get a happy ending. People like us, we destroy everything we touch. The bitterness in his tone surprised even him. He sank back into his chair, burying his face in his hands. For the first time, he saw the full scope of the wreckage he'd caused. Not just in his marriage, but in Mia's life as well. She wasn't innocent in this mess, but she was also a victim of his recklessness. Mia exhaled sharply, stepping away from the desk. You're right, she said quietly. This isn't a fairy tale, but it's also not fair to keep dragging me along while you figure out what you want. I deserve better than that, Ethan, and so does Claire. Her words struck a nerve, leaving Ethan speechless. As she turned to leave, pausing only briefly at the door, he called out to her. Mia, wait. She stopped but didn't turn around. What? I'm sorry, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. For everything. Mia nodded once, though he couldn't see it. Then she walked out, closing the door behind her with a finality that left him reeling. Alone again, Ethan stared at the empty doorway, the weight of his choices pressing down on him harder than ever. He realized now that he couldn't outrun the consequences of his actions. Every lie, every betrayal, every moment of weakness had brought him to this point. A man trapped between two worlds, neither of which he truly belonged to. Are you sure about this? Mia asked over the phone as Ethan packed a suitcase in his bedroom. Her voice carried a mix of hesitation and excitement, though she tried to mask it with practicality. What if someone sees us? What if Claire finds out? I need this, Ethan replied firmly, zipping up the bag with more force than necessary. I can't keep going like this, Mia. I need space to think, to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do next. Mia sighed on the other end of the line, her tone softening. Okay, but promise me one thing. Don't run away from your problems. That's not why we're doing this. We, Ethan echoed, pausing mid-motion. The word hung between them, heavy with implication. Was this really their escape, or just another chapter in the tangled mess they'd created? You know what I mean, Mia said quickly, though her voice betrayed a flicker of doubt. Just be careful, all right? I'll see you tomorrow. As the call ended, Ethan stared at his phone, the weight of her words settling uncomfortably in his chest. She was right. He wasn't running toward answers. He was running away from questions he didn't want to face. And yet, the thought of leaving everything behind, even temporarily, felt like the only lifeline he had left. The drive to Palm Springs was long but scenic, the golden hues of the desert stretching endlessly under a cloudless sky. When Ethan arrived at the resort, he was greeted by lush greenery that contrasted sharply with the arid landscape beyond. The lobby smelled of fresh flowers and polished wood, its opulence designed to make guests forget their troubles the moment they stepped inside. Mia was already there, waiting for him in the suite he'd reserved. She stood on the balcony overlooking the pool, her silhouette framed by the setting sun. For a brief moment, Ethan allowed himself to admire the picture she made. Her hair catching the light, her posture relaxed yet poised. But when she turned to face him, the illusion shattered. "You made it," she said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yeah," Ethan replied, setting his bag down. "I did." They spent the first evening quietly, avoiding any conversation that might dredge up the reasons they were there. Instead, they ordered room service, watched the sunset, and pretended, for a few stolen hours, that nothing else mattered. But the tension between them lingered, unspoken yet palpable. By the second day, the cracks began to show. "This isn't working," Mia blurted out during breakfast on the terrace. They'd barely touched their food, the morning heat pressing down on them despite the shade provided by wide umbrellas. "What do you mean?" Ethan asked, though he already knew the answer. "This, us?" Mia gestured between them, frustration creeping into her voice. "We came here to get away, but all I can think about is how messed up everything is. How messed up we are." Ethan set his fork down, meeting her gaze reluctantly. "You think I don't feel it too? Every second of every day, I'm reminded of what I've done, of who I've hurt. But what am I supposed to do, Mia? Turn back time? Fix everything with a snap of my fingers?" "No," Mia shot back, leaning forward. "But you could start by being honest with yourself, with Claire, with me. Stop pretending this vacation is some magical solution to all your problems. Running away won't fix anything." Her words hit their mark, and Ethan felt the sting of truth in them. He looked away, focusing on the distant horizon where the mountains met the sky. "Then what do you suggest I do? Go home and grovel at Claire's feet? Beg her to forgive me after everything I've put her through?" "Yes," Mia exclaimed, throwing her hands up in exasperation. "At least then you'd be facing reality instead of hiding here like a coward." The accusation struck deep, igniting a spark of anger within him. "A coward? Is that what you think I am?" "I think you're scared," Mia countered, her voice softer now but no less firm. "Scared of losing control. Scared of admitting you made mistakes. Scared of choosing." Ethan clenched his jaw, the truth of her words cutting sharper than any blade. He wanted to argue, to deny it, but he couldn't, because she was right. He was scared, terrified, even, of failing, of regretting, of ruining the lives of everyone he cared about, including hers. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed loudly on the table, breaking the tension. Both of them froze, staring at the screen as Claire's name flashed across it. For a moment, Ethan hesitated, torn between answering and letting it go to voicemail. Finally, he picked it up, his heart pounding in his chest. "Claire?" he answered cautiously, stepping away from the table. "Ethan?" Her voice trembled, fragile and uncertain. "I have something to tell you." Whatever she was about to say, Ethan could hear the significance in her tone. His grip tightened on the phone, dread pooling in his stomach. "What is it?" he asked, bracing himself. There was a pause long enough to make him hold his breath. Then, softly, she spoke the words that would change everything. "I'm pregnant." The world seemed to stop spinning in that instant. Ethan's knees nearly buckled beneath him, the news hitting him like a tidal wave. Pregnant. A baby. Another chance, or perhaps another complication in an already fractured life. He didn't realize Mia was watching him until she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. What happened? Ethan lowered the phone, his expression unreadable. For a moment, he couldn't find the words to explain. All he could think about was the enormity of what Claire had just told him, and the impossible choices ahead. Claire's pregnant, he finally managed to say, his voice hollow. Mia's face went pale, her lips parting in shock. Oh my God. Neither of them spoke after that, the silence stretching between them like an endless chasm. The vacation they'd hoped would provide clarity had only deepened the chaos, forcing Ethan to confront the reality he'd been trying so desperately to avoid. Mia watched him carefully, her earlier frustration giving way to something softer. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. What are you going to do? She asked quietly, breaking the silence that had settled over them like a thick fog. Ethan turned to look at her, though his gaze was distant, unfocused. I don't know, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. How am I supposed to fix this when everything is falling apart? You can't fix it all at once, Mia replied, stepping closer. Her tone was gentle now, almost sympathetic. But you have to start somewhere. You can't just stay here and pretend none of this is happening. Isn't that exactly what we're doing? Ethan snapped, his emotions bubbling to the surface. Running off to some fancy resort while my wife tells me she's having a baby? What kind of man does that make me? A scared one? Mia shot back, her own voice trembling slightly. You think I don't see how torn you are? How much you're struggling to hold everything together. But running won't help, Ethan. It never does. Her words struck a nerve, forcing him to confront the truth he'd been avoiding. She was right, he wasn't solving anything by hiding here. If anything, he was making it worse. Every second he spent in Palm Springs was another moment stolen from Claire. Another chance missed to face the reality of their situation. I need to go home, Ethan said suddenly, his decision crystallizing in an instant. He moved toward the suite door, grabbing his jacket from the chair. Wait, Mia called after him, panic creeping into her voice. What about us? What about me? Ethan stopped, his hand hovering over the doorknob. For a long moment, he didn't answer, unable to meet her eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with regret. There is no us, Mia. There never really was. I made a mistake, a lot of mistakes, and now I have to deal with the consequences. Tears welled up in Mia's eyes, but she blinked them away quickly, refusing to let him see her break down. So that's it? You're just going to walk away? Pretend none of this ever happened? No, Ethan said firmly, turning back to face her. His expression was pained, conflicted. I'll never forget what I've done. To Claire, to you, to myself. But staying here isn't going to change anything. I need to go back and figure out how to fix this mess, even if it means losing everything. The finality in his voice left no room for argument. Mia opened her mouth as if to say something more, but no words came out. Instead, she nodded slowly, wrapping her arms around herself as if to shield against the weight of his departure. The drive back to San Francisco felt endless, each mile dragging Ethan deeper into a storm of thoughts and emotions. By the time he pulled into the driveway of his house, the sun had set, casting the neighborhood in shadows. He sat in the car for a few minutes, staring at the familiar structure before finally mustering the courage to step out. When he opened the front door, Claire was sitting on the couch, her legs tucked beneath her, a cup of tea resting untouched on the coffee table. She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face for some sign of what he was feeling. You came back, she said softly, her voice tinged with surprise. Ethan nodded, closing the door behind him. Of course I came back. This is my home. You're my wife. Claire studied him for a moment longer, then gestured for him to sit beside her. He hesitated before obeying, the distance between them feeling insurmountable despite their proximity. I didn't expect you to drop everything, Claire admitted, her fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. Not after everything that's happened. I should have, Ethan replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have been here for you, for us, from the beginning. But I wasn't. And I'm sorry, Claire. So sorry." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and for the first time in months, he saw a flicker of the woman he'd fallen in love with all those years ago. Hurt still lingered in her eyes, but so did something else. Hope, perhaps, or the faint possibility of forgiveness. "I don't know if I can trust you again," Claire said honestly, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill over. "But I want to try. For the baby. For us." Ethan reached for her hand, his touch tentative but sincere. "Then let me prove it to you. Let me show you that I'm still the man you married. The man who loves you more than anything else in this world." Claire didn't respond immediately, her gaze dropping to their intertwined hands. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken fears and fragile hopes. Finally, she nodded, a small but meaningful gesture. "Okay," she whispered. "We'll try." As Ethan sat there, holding Claire's hand and feeling the weight of her words, he realized that this was only the beginning. Rebuilding their marriage wouldn't be easy. It would require sacrifice, patience, and countless difficult conversations. But for the first time in a long time, he felt a glimmer of hope. And yet, even as he embraced the possibility of redemption, he couldn't shake the image of Mia standing alone on the balcony, watching him leave. The guilt of walking away from her gnawed at him, a reminder that every choice came with its own set of consequences. Claire had agreed to give him another chance, tentatively, cautiously, but it wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, and Ethan knew better than to expect it overnight. What she'd offered him was a fragile thread, one that could snap if he so much as breathed wrong. The thought terrified him, but it also ignited something deep within, a fierce determination to prove himself worthy of her trust again. When he finally got out of bed, he found Claire in the kitchen, sipping coffee by the window. She looked smaller somehow, more vulnerable, as though the weight of everything they'd been through had settled heavily on her shoulders. Ethan hesitated in the doorway, unsure of how to approach her without overstepping. "Morning," he said softly, breaking the silence. Claire glanced over her shoulder, offering him a faint smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Morning." Ethan moved closer, pouring himself a cup of coffee before sitting across from her at the table. They sat in silence for a while, the tension between them palpable but not hostile. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice hesitant but sincere. "I meant what I said last night," he began, setting his mug down. "About wanting to make things right. About proving myself to you." Claire nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the steam rising from her cup. "I believe you want to try, Ethan, but wanting isn't enough. You've hurt me more times than I can count. And now there's this baby. Another life depending on us." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut, reminding him of the stakes. This wasn't just about repairing their marriage anymore. It was about creating a foundation strong enough to raise a child together. The responsibility felt overwhelming, but also grounding. "I know," Ethan replied, his voice cracking slightly. "And I don't expect you to forgive me easily or quickly. But I need you to know that I'm committed to this. To us, whatever it takes." Claire studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, she leaned forward, placing her hand gently over his. "Then start by being honest. No more secrets, no more excuses. Just tell me the truth." Ethan swallowed hard, the request simple yet daunting. Honesty had never been his strong suit, not when it came to his mistakes. But if he wanted any chance of salvaging their relationship, he owed her that much. "The trip to Palm Springs," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't business. It was Mia." Claire flinched visibly, pulling her hand away as if burned. Her jaw tightened, and for a moment, Ethan thought she might walk out of the room. But instead, she took a deep breath, steadying herself. "How long?" she asked, her tone eerily calm despite the storm brewing in her eyes. "A year," Ethan admitted, shame washing over him. "Maybe longer. I don't even know anymore. Started as, I don't know, a distraction. something to fill the void. But it spiraled out of control, and Stop, Claire interrupted sharply, holding up a hand. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. Just stop. I don't need the details. I already know enough. Ethan hung his head, unable to meet her gaze. The guilt was suffocating, pressing down on him like a lead blanket. He wanted to apologize, to beg for forgiveness, but he knew words wouldn't be enough. Actions were the only thing that mattered now. I'll end it, he said firmly, looking up at her. For good. Today. Claire let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. You think that fixes anything? That cutting her out erases what you've done? No, Ethan replied honestly. But it's a start. A step toward showing you that I'm serious about changing. About being the man you deserve. Claire stared at him for a long moment, her emotions warring behind her guarded expression. Finally, she sighed, leaning back in her chair. Fine, do it. But don't come back here expecting me to act like everything's okay. Trust takes time, Ethan. And I'm not sure I have any left to give. Her words stung, but Ethan couldn't blame her. He'd burned through every ounce of goodwill she'd ever extended him. All he could do now was hope that his actions would speak louder than his promises. Later that afternoon, Ethan found himself standing outside Mia's apartment, his heart pounding in his chest. He hadn't called ahead. He couldn't bring himself to warn her. Instead, he knocked on the door, bracing himself for the confrontation that was sure to follow. When Mia opened the door, her face lit up briefly with surprise before falling into a guarded frown. Ethan, what are you doing here? We need to talk, he said simply, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. The scent of lavender lingered in the air, a stark contrast to the tension crackling between them. Mia crossed her arms, her posture defensive. About what? Your sudden change of heart? Or did Claire kick you out already? It's over, Mia, Ethan said bluntly, his voice firm despite the knot twisting in his stomach. Between us, between everything, I'm going home to my wife, to my family. Mia's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed with anger. So that's it? You're just going to walk away? After everything we've been through? Yes, Ethan replied, his tone unwavering. Because none of it matters compared to what I stand to lose. I love Claire. I always have. And I'm not going to throw that away for whatever this is. Tears welled up in Mia's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You're making a mistake, Ethan. She'll never forgive you. You'll spend the rest of your life paying for this. Maybe, Ethan conceded, his voice softer now, but at least I'll be paying for it with the people who matter most. With my family. Mia stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for some sign of doubt or hesitation. When she found none, she turned away, her shoulders trembling with suppressed emotion. Get out, she whispered, her voice breaking. Just go. Ethan hesitated, torn between guilt and resolve. But he knew staying wouldn't help either of them. Without another word, he turned and walked out, closing the door behind him. As he drove away from Mia's apartment, Ethan felt a strange mix of relief and grief. He'd made the right choice, that much he was certain of. But the cost of that choice weighed heavily on him, a reminder that redemption rarely came without sacrifice. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. The hardest part was only beginning. Rebuilding his marriage, earning Claire's trust, becoming the father his unborn child deserved. It would take everything he had and then some. But for the first time in years, Ethan felt a sense of purpose, a reason to fight. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Claire broke the silence with a question that had clearly been weighing on her mind. Did you mean it? She asked softly, her gaze fixed on the book in her lap rather than on him. What you said about Mia, about ending things? Ethan set aside the newspaper he'd been pretending to read and turned to face her fully. Her vulnerability struck him deeply, the way her voice wavered, the way her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the edges of the book. He knew this wasn't just curiosity. It was a test, a chance for him to prove that he was serious about rebuilding their trust. Yes, he replied firmly, meeting her eyes. I meant every word. I ended it, Claire. For good. She studied him for a moment, searching for any hint of dishonesty. When she found none, she nodded slowly, though her expression remained guarded. And what about everything else? The lies, the excuses, the nights you weren't where you said you'd be. Are you done running from all of that too? Her words hit him like a punch to the gut, forcing him to confront the full scope of his betrayal. Not just the affair, but the years of neglect, the broken promises, the emotional distance he'd created between them. It wasn't enough to simply cut Mia out of his life. He had to dismantle the habits and patterns that had led him there in the first place. I'm trying, he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. But I can't undo the past, Claire. All I can do is promise to be better, to be here, fully. Not just physically, but emotionally. No more hiding, no more running. Claire looked away, tears welling up in her eyes. She didn't respond immediately, instead taking a shaky breath as she processed his words. Finally, she whispered, It's not just about being here, Ethan. It's about staying. Even when it gets hard. Especially when it gets hard. Her vulnerability gutted him. He reached for her hand, hesitating briefly before intertwining his fingers with hers. Then teach me how, he said softly. Show me what I need to do to stay. I'll listen this time. I swear. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of their shared history hung between them, heavy but not suffocating. Slowly, Claire squeezed his hand, a small but meaningful gesture. It wasn't forgiveness, it might never be, but it was progress. The next day, Claire decided to take matters into her own hands. While Ethan was at work, she began digging through his phone, determined to uncover the truth behind his claims. She told herself it wasn't about mistrust. It was about protecting herself and their unborn child. If Ethan truly intended to change, then she needed proof. Scrolling through his messages, she found nothing incriminating. No texts from Mia, no secret plans, no evidence of continued deceit. But something else caught her eye. A series of emails between Ethan and an old friend from college, someone named Daniel. At first glance, they seemed harmless enough. Casual catch-ups, jokes about their glory days. But one email stood out, its tone darker, heavier. You've built quite the empire, Carter, Daniel had written. But tell me, how much of yourself did you lose along the way? Fame and fortune don't mean much if you're miserable. Ethan's reply was brief but telling. Miserable doesn't even begin to cover it. Claire stared at the screen, her heart pounding in her chest. These weren't just idle words. They were a confession. A glimpse into the man Ethan had become beneath the polished exterior. A man who felt trapped by his own success, suffocated by the expectations he'd placed on himself. She snapped a screenshot of the exchange before closing the phone, guilt mixing with determination. She hated invading his privacy, but she couldn't ignore the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. Ethan wasn't just fighting to save their marriage, he was fighting to reclaim himself. That night, after dinner, Claire confronted him. They were sitting on the couch again, the same spot where they'd talked the night before. This time, however, the atmosphere was charged with tension. I went through your phone today, she admitted bluntly, watching his reaction closely. Ethan stiffened, his jaw tightening. You what? Don't get defensive? Claire shot back, holding up the screenshot. I wasn't snooping because I don't trust you. I did it because I need to trust you. And these emails? She trailed off, shaking her head. They explain so much. Ethan took the phone from her, scanning the message thread. His shoulders sagged as he read it, the weight of his own words pressing down on him. Claire, you feel lost, she finished for him, her voice softer now. Trapped by the life you built. Is that why you strayed? Because you were looking for, what? An escape. It wasn't just that, Ethan replied, his voice cracking under the strain of emotions. Yes, I felt suffocated, but I also let my ego get the best of me. I thought I could have it all: success, power, freedom. And when I realized I couldn't, I blamed everyone else. You, work, life itself. But the truth is, Claire, I only have myself to blame." Tears streamed down Claire's face as she listened to him, her heart breaking for the man she once loved and still wanted to believe could change. "So what happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How do we move forward from this?" Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. For the first time, he allowed himself to be completely vulnerable, shedding the armor of pride and control he'd worn for so long. "We start over," he said simply. "Not as the people we used to be, but as who we are now. Flawed, hurt, scared, but willing to try. Together." Claire hesitated, torn between hope and fear. Finally, she nodded, reaching for his hand. "Okay, we'll try." As they sat there, holding onto each other amidst the wreckage of their past, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope flicker within him. The road ahead would be long and difficult, filled with moments of doubt and pain. But for the first time in years, he felt grounded, anchored by the love he still had for Claire and the promise of a future worth fighting for. One afternoon, as Ethan sat at his desk in the office, he received a text from Claire that sent a chill down his spine. "We need to talk. Tonight." Her tone was calm but firm, and Ethan immediately felt his stomach tighten. Was this it? Had she reached her breaking point? He spent the rest of the day distracted, unable to focus on work. Every email, every phone call seemed trivial compared to the conversation waiting for him at home. When he arrived, Claire was already seated at the dining table, her laptop open in front of her. The room was dimly lit, the soft glow of the overhead light casting shadows across her face. She looked up as he entered, her expression unreadable. "You're home," she said simply, closing the laptop with a click. "What's going on, Claire?" Ethan asked, setting his briefcase down. His voice betrayed the anxiety bubbling inside him. "You sounded serious." Claire gestured for him to sit, and he obeyed, his heart pounding in his chest. For a moment, she didn't speak, instead studying him with an intensity that made him feel exposed, vulnerable in a way he hadn't been in years. "I did some digging," she finally said, her voice steady despite the tension radiating off her. "About Mia." Ethan froze, his mind racing. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I found out who she is, or rather, what she's been doing behind your back." Claire slid a folder across the table toward him. "Open it." With trembling hands, Ethan picked up the folder and flipped it open. Inside were printed emails, financial records, and screenshots of conversations, all implicating Mia in a scheme to leverage their affair for professional gain. She had been secretly negotiating promotions, raises, and even board positions within his company, using their relationship as leverage against key executives. "She used you, Ethan," Claire continued, her voice sharp with anger. "Not just emotionally, but professionally. While you were busy feeling guilty, she was planning her next move, how to climb higher without ever looking back." Ethan stared at the documents, his vision blurring as the reality of Mia's betrayal sank in. All those late-night meetings, all those whispered promises, they weren't about him. They were about power, ambition, and self-preservation. He felt sick, the nausea rising in his throat. I didn't know," he stammered, shaking his head. "I swear, Claire, I had no idea." "I believe you," Claire replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. "But that doesn't change the fact that she manipulated you and us. She played both sides, Ethan. And now, thanks to her greed, we're stuck dealing with the fallout." "What fallout?" Ethan asked, dread pooling in his stomach. Claire hesitated before answering, choosing her words carefully. "Some of these emails ended up in the wrong hands. Someone leaked them, to the press, to your competitors, to anyone who would listen. By tomorrow morning, everyone will know about your affair. About Mia. About everything." The news hit Ethan like a freight train, leaving him breathless. Public humiliation was one thing, he'd faced scandals before, but this was different. This wasn't just about his reputation. It was about his family, his wife, their unborn child. How could he protect them when the world was about to tear them apart? "Claire, I'm so sorry," he whispered, tears welling up in his eyes. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "I know," Claire replied, her voice softer now. And maybe that's why I haven't walked away yet. Because deep down, I still believe there's good in you, Ethan. But you need to decide right now. Are you willing to fight for us? To put me and this baby first, no matter what happens tomorrow? Ethan looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw the woman he'd fallen in love with all those years ago. The strong, resilient woman who had stood by him through thick and thin. He realized then that she wasn't asking for perfection or guarantees. She was asking for commitment, for proof that he valued their family more than anything else. Yes, he said firmly, taking her hand in his. Whatever it takes, I'll do it. For you. For us. Claire nodded slowly, a flicker of hope crossing her features. Then we face this together. No more running. No more hiding. Later that night, as they lay in bed side by side, Ethan couldn't sleep. His mind raced with thoughts of what awaited them. The headlines, the judgment, the whispers. But beneath the fear was something else. Determination. For the first time in years, he felt purposeful. Not because he wanted to save face, but because he wanted to save his family. Claire must have sensed his restlessness, because she reached for his hand in the darkness. We'll get through this, she murmured, her voice barely audible. As long as we stick together. Ethan squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her presence. We will, he promised, though he knew the road ahead would be anything but easy. No matter what. The next morning, the scandal broke. News outlets plastered Ethan's name across headlines, painting him as a reckless tycoon whose personal life had spiraled out of control. Social media erupted with gossip, and within hours, his empire began to crumble under the weight of public scrutiny. But amidst the chaos, Ethan stood tall, literally and figuratively. With Claire by his side, he held a press conference outside their home, addressing the world with raw honesty. I made mistakes, he admitted, his voice steady despite the cameras flashing around him. Mistakes that hurt the people I love most. But I'm here today to say that I'm committed to making things right. Not for my career, not for my reputation, but for my family. As he spoke, Claire stood beside him, her hand resting gently on her growing belly. Her presence was a silent testament to their unity, a reminder that love could endure even the harshest storms. The crowd fell silent, captivated by the sincerity in Ethan's voice. Some remained skeptical, others moved by his vulnerability. But none of that mattered to Ethan. What mattered was the woman standing beside him, the woman who had chosen to stay, to fight alongside him. But amidst the chaos, there was one constant. Claire. She stood by him, not because she condoned his mistakes, but because she believed in the possibility of redemption. Her unwavering support became Ethan's anchor, grounding him when the weight of public judgment threatened to pull him under. One evening, as they sat together in their dimly lit living room, Claire broke the silence with a question that had clearly been weighing on her mind. Do you think you'll ever forgive yourself? Ethan looked up from the glass of whiskey he'd been nursing, surprised by the vulnerability in her voice. I don't know, he admitted, setting the glass aside. Every time I close my eyes, I see the pain I caused you, the trust one shattered. How can I forgive myself when I don't even know if I deserve it? Claire studied him for a moment, her expression softening. You keep saying you want to make things right. For me, for the baby. But what about for you? When are you going to stop punishing yourself? Her words caught him off guard, forcing him to confront a truth he'd been avoiding. His guilt wasn't just about making amends. It was also about self-preservation. He'd spent so much time trying to fix the damage he'd done to others that he hadn't considered whether he deserved forgiveness or healing. I don't know how, he confessed, his voice trembling with emotion. How do you move past something like this? Knowing you hurt the people you love most. You start by acknowledging that you're human, Claire replied gently, reaching for his hand. We all make mistakes, Ethan. What matters is what we do after we've made them. You've taken responsibility. You've apologized not just to me but to the world. Now it's time to let go of the shame and focus on rebuilding. Ethan squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her touch. For the first time, he allowed himself to consider the possibility of forgiveness. Not just from Claire, but from himself. It wouldn't happen overnight, but maybe, just maybe, he could learn to live with the scars without letting them define him. Meanwhile, Mia was dealing with her own fallout. The leaked emails had exposed not only her affair with Ethan but also her manipulative tactics within the company. Executives who had once praised her ambition now distanced themselves, unwilling to associate with someone whose name had become synonymous with scandal. Her carefully constructed facade was crumbling, leaving her isolated and desperate. Sitting alone in her apartment, Mia scrolled through news articles detailing her downfall. Each headline felt like another nail in her coffin. Ambition gone wrong. The rise and fall of Mia Bennett, Mia's double life. From assistant to power player, and back again. She threw her phone across the room, tears streaming down her face. For years, she'd convinced herself that success justified any means necessary. But now, stripped of everything she'd worked so hard to achieve, she realized how hollow her victories had been. A knock at the door interrupted her spiral of despair. Wiping her tears hastily, she opened it to find Daniel, the same old friend of Ethan's whose email exchange Ethan and Claire had discovered weeks earlier. "Daniel," Mia asked, startled. "What are you doing here?" "I came to check on you," he replied, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. His tone was kind but firm. "I heard about everything. Thought you might need someone to talk to." Mia laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "Talk won't fix this. Nothing will." "That's not true," Daniel countered, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've hit rock bottom, sure. But sometimes, that's exactly where you need to be to start over." "Start over?" Mia echoed, incredulous. "How am I supposed to do that? My reputation's ruined. Everyone hates me. Even Ethan." "Forget about Ethan," Daniel interrupted sharply. "This isn't about him anymore. It's about you, who you want to be moving forward. Do you really think clinging to anger and regret is going to help?" Mia hesitated, his words striking a nerve. For years, she'd defined herself by external validation. Her job, her relationships, her status. But now, stripped of all those things, she was forced to confront the emptiness beneath. "What if I don't know who I am without them?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Then figure it out," Daniel replied simply. "Take some time away from the city. Reconnect with yourself. Start small, volunteer, travel, right? Whatever helps you rediscover who you are. Beyond the titles and accolades." Mia nodded slowly, though doubt lingered in her eyes. "It sounds scary." "It will be," Daniel admitted with a small smile. "But isn't that better than staying stuck where you are?" For the first time in weeks, Mia felt a flicker of hope. A fragile but undeniable sense that perhaps, just perhaps, redemption was possible. Not through revenge or manipulation, but through self-reflection and growth. Back at the Carter residence, Ethan and Claire were preparing for bed when the phone rang. It was late, and neither of them expected anyone to call at such an hour. Ethan answered cautiously, his heart skipping a beat when he recognized the voice on the other end. "Ethan, it's Mia." He froze, gripping the phone tightly. "What do you want?" "I'm leaving," she said simply, her tone devoid of malice or bitterness. "Leaving California. Leaving the company. Leaving everything." Ethan exhaled sharply, relief washing over him, but also a pang of guilt. Despite everything, part of him still cared for her, however complicated that care might be. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice heavy with emotion. "For everything." "So am I," Mia replied softly. "Goodbye, Ethan." As the line went dead, Ethan stared at the phone, overwhelmed by the finality of her words. Whatever connection they'd shared, however flawed and destructive, was truly over now. And while it should have brought him closure, it instead left him grappling with the complexity of human relationships. The way love, betrayal, and forgiveness intertwined in ways that defied logic. Claire appeared in the doorway, her expression concerned. "Who was that?" "Mia," Ethan replied, setting the phone down. "She's leaving town." Claire nodded slowly, processing the information. "Is that okay with you?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted, running a hand through his hair. Part of me feels guilty, like I should have done more, but another part knows it's for the best, for both of us. Claire stepped closer, wrapping her arms around him. You can't carry everyone's burdens, Ethan. Sometimes, all you can do is wish them well and focus on your own path. Ethan rested his chin on top of her head, holding her tightly. Her words resonated deeply, reminding him that healing wasn't about fixing everything. It was about choosing where to direct his energy. And right now, his priority was clear. Claire, their unborn child, and the fragile but hopeful future they were building together. One evening, Ethan found himself at a charity gala hosted by an old friend from college. Daniel, the same man who had reached out to Mia. It wasn't something he'd planned to attend. In fact, he'd initially refused the invitation. But Claire had insisted, reminding him that isolation wouldn't help them move forward. You need to start reconnecting with people, she'd said gently. Not just for your sake, but for ours. We can't let fear dictate our lives. So there he stood, dressed in a suit that felt foreign after weeks of staying home, sipping champagne as he mingled awkwardly among acquaintances who either avoided eye contact or stared openly, whispering behind raised hands. He hated every second of it, but he reminded himself why he was there. For Claire, for their future. As he wandered through the crowded room, he spotted Daniel near the bar, nursing a drink and observing the crowd with an amused expression. Catching sight of Ethan, Daniel waved him over. Ethan Carter, Daniel greeted warmly, clapping him on the shoulder. I didn't think you'd show up. I almost didn't, Ethan admitted, forcing a smile. But my wife convinced me otherwise. Ah, Claire, Daniel said, nodding appreciatively. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She is, Ethan replied without hesitation, his voice softening at the mention of her name. Stronger than I deserve, honestly. Daniel studied him for a moment, then gestured toward the balcony overlooking the city skyline. Let's step outside, get some fresh air. Once they were alone, Daniel turned to Ethan, his demeanor shifting from casual to serious. How are you holding up? Really? Ethan hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. But something about Daniel's genuine concern made him drop his guard. It's complicated. Some days I feel like we're making progress. Others, I wonder if I've already ruined everything. That's normal, Daniel replied, leaning against the railing. Rebuilding trust takes time. And humility. Lots of humility. Ethan chuckled bitterly, shaking his head. Humility isn't exactly my strong suit. My whole life, I've been so focused on success, on proving myself, that I lost sight of what really matters. And now, Daniel prompted, now I'm trying to figure out who I am without all the titles and accolades. Ethan confessed, his voice heavy with emotion. Who I want to be. For Claire. For the baby. For myself. Daniel nodded thoughtfully, taking a sip of his drink. Do you remember that email I sent you? About fame and fortune not meaning much if you're miserable. Of course, Ethan replied, recalling the words that had once stung so deeply. At the time, he'd dismissed them as naive idealism. Now they felt prophetic. Well, I meant it, Daniel said simply. You built this incredible empire, but at what cost? If you're not happy, if you're not fulfilled, then none of it matters. Ethan stared out at the glittering cityscape, the weight of Daniel's words settling over him. For years, he defined himself by external achievements. The size of his bank account, the number of deals closed, the respect or fear he commanded in boardrooms. But stripped of those things, he realized how empty they truly were. They couldn't fill the void left by years of neglecting the people who mattered most. What if it's too late? Ethan asked quietly, voicing the fear that had haunted him since the scandal broke. What if I've already lost too much to ever get it back? It's never too late, Daniel replied firmly. Not if you're willing to fight for it. Not if you're willing to change. Not just for others, but for yourself. Ethan turned to look at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt. When he found none, he nodded slowly, feeling a flicker of resolve ignite within him. Maybe he couldn't undo the past, but he could shape the future. He owed it to Claire, to their unborn child, and to himself. Later that night, as Ethan drove home, he replayed the conversation with Daniel in his mind. The words resonated deeply, forcing him to confront uncomfortable truths about his priorities and motivations. By the time he walked through the front door, he knew what he needed to do. Claire was waiting for him in the living room, curled up on the couch with a book. She looked up as he entered, her expression softening into a tentative smile. "How was it?" "Awkward," Ethan admitted, sitting beside her. "But enlightening." "Oh," Claire prompted, setting the book aside. "In what way?" "I ran into Daniel," Ethan explained, meeting her gaze. "We talked about everything. About how I've spent my whole life chasing success, thinking it would make me happy. But it didn't. It just left me hollow." Claire listened intently, her eyes reflecting both sympathy and understanding. "And now I realize I don't want to live like that anymore," Ethan replied, his voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside him. "I want to focus on what really matters, on us. On being a better husband, a better father, a better person." Tears welled up in Claire's eyes, but she blinked them back, reaching for his hand. "That's all I've ever wanted, Ethan. For you to choose us, to prioritize love over ambition." "I'm choosing you," Ethan promised, his voice thick with emotion. "No matter what it takes, no matter how hard it gets, I'm choosing you." Claire leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. For the first time in months, the tension between them began to ease, replaced by a fragile but undeniable sense of hope. They weren't out of the woods yet. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but they were facing it together. It was early morning when the doorbell rang, shattering the quiet stillness of their home. Ethan answered it, expecting a delivery or perhaps one of their neighbors. Instead, he found Claire standing on the other side of the threshold, her suitcase in hand and determination etched into every line of her face. "Claire," Ethan asked, his voice tinged with confusion. "What are you doing here? I thought you were at yoga." "I lied," she admitted bluntly, stepping past him into the house. Her tone was calm but firm, her movements deliberate. She set the suitcase down near the couch before turning to face him. "I needed to see you, to confront you without distractions." Ethan's stomach tightened, dread pooling in his chest. "Confront me about what?" "This," Claire replied, pulling an envelope from her bag and handing it to him. Inside were photos, dozens of them taken over the course of weeks. Photos of Mia entering luxury hotels, meeting with influential executives, even laughing with Daniel. The message was clear: Mia wasn't gone. Not entirely. "What is this supposed to prove?" Ethan demanded, his voice rising as anger began to bubble beneath the surface. "You think I'm still involved with her? That I orchestrated all this behind your back?" "No," Claire shot back, her own voice sharp with frustration. "But I need to know the truth, Ethan. All of it. Because if there's even a chance you're lying to me again, I can't stay." "I won't." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut, leaving him momentarily speechless. He stared at the photos, his mind racing. How could Mia have resurfaced now, after everything they'd been through? And why would Daniel be meeting with her? "I swear to you," Ethan said finally, his voice cracking under the weight of emotion. "I haven't seen her since that night she left. I don't know why she's doing this, or why Daniel's involved, but it has nothing to do with me." Claire searched his face for any sign of dishonesty, her eyes brimming with tears. When she found none, she let out a shaky breath, sinking onto the couch. "Then who does it involve, Ethan? Because someone clearly wants us to believe otherwise." Later that day, unable to shake the unease gnawing at him, Ethan decided to confront Daniel directly. He drove to his friend's office unannounced, barging in without waiting for permission. "Explain this," Ethan demanded, slamming the envelope of photos onto Daniel's desk. His voice was low but laced with fury. "Why are you meeting with Mia? What game are you playing?" Daniel looked up, startled by the intrusion. But when he saw the photos, his expression shifted from surprise to guilt. "Ethan, I can explain. Start talking, Ethan growled, leaning forward. Because right now, it looks like you're trying to sabotage my marriage. Again. It's not like that, Daniel insisted, holding up his hands in surrender. Mia reached out to me last week. She's desperate, Ethan. Scared and alone. She claims she's being blackmailed. Blackmailed? Ethan echoed, incredulous. By whom? She wouldn't say, Daniel replied, running a hand through his hair. But whoever it is, they're using these photos, these meetings, as leverage. They want something from her. Something big. Ethan sank into the chair across from Daniel, his mind reeling. If what Daniel said was true, then Mia wasn't acting out of malice. She was fighting for survival. But that didn't change the fact that her actions were threatening everything he and Claire had worked so hard to rebuild. And you believed her? Ethan asked skeptically, his voice tinged with bitterness. After everything she's done? Yes, Daniel admitted, his tone softening. Because I've seen people in situations like hers before. People who make mistakes and end up paying for them tenfold. She's scared, Ethan. And whether we like it or not, she's tied to your life now. Which means whatever happens to her affects you too. The realization struck Ethan like a thunderclap. No matter how much he wanted to distance himself from Mia, their lives were intertwined, irrevocably so. And if someone was targeting her, they might soon come after him next. That evening, Ethan returned home, exhausted but determined to tell Claire the truth. She was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, her movements slow and methodical. When she heard him enter, she turned to face him, her expression guarded. Did you find out anything? She asked softly, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Mia's being blackmailed, Ethan explained, joining her at the counter. Someone's using these photos to manipulate her. Daniel believes her. Claire studied him carefully, weighing his words against the turmoil swirling behind his eyes. Finally, she nodded slowly. So what do? We protect ourselves, Ethan replied firmly, taking her hands in his. Whoever's behind this isn't just targeting Mia. They're trying to destroy us. And I won't let that happen. Not again. Claire hesitated, torn between fear and resolve. How? By facing it head-on, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty ahead. Together. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the situation hung between them, heavy but not suffocating. Slowly, Claire squeezed his hand, a small but meaningful gesture of solidarity. Okay, she whispered, her voice barely audible. We'll face it together. One evening, as they sat at the kitchen table surrounded by documents and photographs, Claire finally broke the silence. Her voice was soft yet firm, cutting through the quiet hum of the room like a knife. Ethan, we're missing something. Something big. Ethan looked up from the stack of papers in front of him, his brow furrowed. What do you mean? I mean, whoever is behind this isn't just targeting Mia, Claire explained, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made him sit up straighter. They're using her to get to us, to destroy everything we've built or tried to rebuild. Her words sent a chill down Ethan's spine. She was right. The pattern was too deliberate, too calculated to be random. This wasn't about revenge or greed, it was personal. And if they didn't figure out who was pulling the strings soon, they risked losing not only their marriage but also their sanity. You think it's someone we know? Ethan said slowly, his mind racing through the list of potential suspects. Business rivals, former employees, even acquaintances. All had motives, all had grudges. But none stood out as the mastermind behind such a sinister scheme. It has to be, Claire replied, her voice trembling slightly despite her resolve. Who else would know enough about our lives, our weaknesses, to orchestrate something like this? Before Ethan could respond, the sound of their phone ringing shattered the momentary stillness. He reached for it instinctively, his heart pounding when he saw the caller ID. Unknown number. Don't answer it, Claire warned sharply, her hand gripping his arm tightly. It's probably them. But Ethan hesitated, curiosity battling caution. Against Claire's protests, He pressed the green button and put the call on speaker. "Hello," he answered cautiously, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. Well, Ethan Carter," came a distorted voice on the other end, cold and mocking. "Long time no hear." Claire's grip on Ethan's arm tightened painfully, her breath catching in her throat. The voice was unfamiliar, yet its tone carried a chilling familiarity, as though it belonged to someone who had been watching them for far too long. "Who are you?" Ethan demanded, leaning forward as if proximity could somehow unmask the caller. "What do you want?" "Oh, I think you already know," the voice replied smoothly, each word dripping with malice. "Let's just say I'm here to remind you of the consequences of your choices. Choices you thought you could walk away from without paying the price." Ethan exchanged a glance with Claire, whose face had gone pale. They both knew exactly what, or rather whom, the caller was referring to: Mia. The affair. The scandal. All the secrets Ethan had tried so desperately to bury. "I ended things with Mia," Ethan shot back, his voice rising with frustration. "I walked away. Isn't that what you wanted? For me to choose my family over whatever this is?" The caller chuckled darkly, the sound sending shivers down both their spines. "Oh, Ethan, you really think it's that simple? That walking away absolves you of your sins? No. This goes deeper than one woman. Much deeper." "What does that mean?" Claire interjected suddenly, her voice shaking but defiant. "If you have something to say, say it. Stop playing games." There was a pause on the other end, long enough to make them wonder if the caller had hung up. Then, finally, the voice returned, colder and more menacing than before. "Fine. Here's the deal. You have two options, Ethan. Either you step down from your company, completely relinquish control, or I release everything. Every dirty little secret, every lie, every betrayal, publicly, permanently." Ethan felt the blood drain from his face, his mind reeling at the ultimatum. Stepping down meant giving up not just his career but his identity, the very foundation upon which he had built his life. Yet refusing meant risking everything he held dear. "And if I refuse?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then prepare to watch your world burn," the caller replied simply, starting with Claire. With that, the line went dead, leaving behind an oppressive silence that filled the room like smoke. Neither Ethan nor Claire moved, their bodies frozen in shock and fear. After several agonizing minutes, Claire finally spoke, her voice trembling but resolute. "You can't give in to them, Ethan. Whoever this is, they're trying to break you, to take away everything you've worked for. And what if they succeed?" Ethan countered, his voice cracking under the strain of emotion. "What if stepping down is the only way to protect you? To protect us?" Claire shook her head fiercely, tears streaming down her face. "No, I won't let you sacrifice yourself, not again. Not for me. We'll find another way. Together." Her determination reignited a flicker of hope within him, though it was overshadowed by the enormity of the decision ahead. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as though afraid she might disappear if he let go. "I won't lose you," he whispered into her hair, his voice thick with emotion. "Whatever happens, I promise I'll keep you safe." Claire nodded against his chest, drawing strength from his embrace. "Then we fight. Together. We need to figure out who this is," Claire said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady despite the turmoil swirling inside her. "Whoever it is knows too much about us. Our lives, our secrets. They're not just guessing. They've been watching." Ethan nodded slowly, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee mug absent-mindedly. "You're right, but how do we narrow it down? Everyone I've ever crossed paths with feels like a suspect right now." Claire hesitated, then leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "What about Mia? She's still connected to all of this. Maybe she knows more than she's letting on, or maybe whoever's blackmailing her is using her as bait." Ethan frowned, considering the possibility. "I don't trust her, not after everything, but you might be onto something. If someone's pulling her strings, she could lead us to them." "Then we confront her," Claire declared firmly, meeting his gaze without flinching. Not because I want to help her, but because she's the key to figuring this out. Ethan sighed deeply, torn between reluctance and necessity. All right, but if we do this, we do it carefully. We can't afford any mistakes. Later that afternoon, Ethan dialed Mia's number, his hand trembling slightly as he pressed the phone to his ear. It rang twice before she answered, her voice hesitant and guarded. "Ethan?" Mia asked, clearly surprised. "Why are you calling me?" "We need to talk," he replied bluntly, cutting straight to the point. "In person. Now." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a soft sigh. "Okay. Where?" They agreed to meet at a secluded park on the outskirts of town, a neutral location far from prying eyes. When they arrived, Mia was already waiting for them, sitting on a bench beneath the shade of a large oak tree. She looked smaller somehow, her usual confidence replaced by an air of vulnerability. "You wanted to see me," Mia said as they approached, her tone cautious. "What's going on?" "We know about the blackmail," Ethan began, cutting straight to the chase. "And we think whoever's behind it is targeting us too." Mia's eyes widened in shock, though whether it was genuine or feigned was hard to tell. "Targeting you? Why would they?" "Don't play dumb," Claire interrupted sharply, stepping forward. Her voice carried a sharp edge, one that left no room for evasion. "This isn't just about you anymore. It's about us, all of us. And unless you tell us what you know, we're all in danger." Mia hesitated, her gaze dropping to the ground. For a moment, she seemed lost in thought, weighing her options. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to believe it at first, but there's someone who's been feeding me information about your company, about your marriage. They said they'd ruin me if I didn't cooperate." "Who is it?" Ethan demanded, his voice rising with urgency. "You have to tell us." "I don't know," Mia exclaimed, tears welling up in her eyes. "They never showed their face. Everything was through encrypted messages, anonymous emails. All I know is that they hate you, Ethan. Hate you enough to destroy everything you care about." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Whoever this person was, their vendetta ran deep, deeper than Ethan had anticipated. He exchanged a glance with Claire, both of them silently processing the gravity of the situation. "And now?" Claire asked softly, turning back to Mia. "What happens now?" "I leave," Mia replied simply, her voice tinged with resignation. "I can't stay here anymore. Not when my presence puts you in danger. Not when I'm nothing but a pawn in someone else's game." Before either Ethan or Claire could respond, Mia stood up, brushing past them without another word. As she walked away, her figure growing smaller in the distance, Ethan felt a pang of guilt mixed with relief. Whatever role she had played in their downfall, she was now just as trapped as they were. That evening, as Ethan and Claire returned home, the weight of the day's revelations settled over them like a suffocating blanket. They sat together on the couch, neither speaking, yet both acutely aware of the storm brewing on the horizon. "What if we can't stop them?" Claire asked suddenly, her voice trembling with unspoken fear. "What if they win?" Ethan turned to look at her, his heart aching at the vulnerability in her eyes. He reached for her hand, squeezing it tightly. "They won't, because I won't let them. No matter what it takes, I'll protect you. Us." Claire nodded slowly, drawing strength from his resolve. "Then we fight. Together." One evening, as they sifted through documents in Ethan's home office, Claire suddenly froze, her eyes locked onto a name scribbled in the margins of an expense report. Victor Langston. "Ethan," she said sharply, holding up the paper. "Does this name mean anything to you?" Ethan leaned forward, his brow furrowing as he studied the unfamiliar name. "No, should it?" "I think so," Claire replied, her voice trembling with urgency. She grabbed her laptop and began typing furiously. Moments later, she turned the screen toward him, revealing an article about Victor Langston, a former business partner who had been forced out of the company years ago after allegations of embezzlement. "He sued you," Claire continued, scrolling through the details. Claimed you framed him for the theft to protect your own reputation. The case was dismissed. But what if he never let it go? Ethan felt a chill run down his spine as memories came flooding back. Memories of heated boardroom arguments, betrayal, and ultimately victory. He had believed the matter settled, buried beneath layers of legal red tape. But now, staring at Victor's face on the screen, he realized how wrong he had been. This has to be him, Ethan muttered, his voice heavy with dread. It all makes sense. The blackmail, the threats, the vendetta against me. Claire nodded slowly, her expression grim. If it is him, then we're running out of time. Once he releases whatever dirt he has on us, there's no going back. Ethan stood abruptly, pacing the room as adrenaline surged through him. We need proof, something concrete to expose him before he exposes us. But how? Claire asked, her voice tinged with desperation. He's been careful, too careful. We can't just walk into his life and expect answers. A plan began to form in Ethan's mind, risky but necessary. Then we use ourselves as bait. What? Claire exclaimed, her eyes widening in alarm. Are you insane? That's exactly what he wants. Yes, Ethan replied firmly, stopping in front of her. And if we give him what he wants, if we make him feel like he's winning, we might catch him off guard. Force him to reveal himself. Claire stared at him, torn between fear and determination. Finally, she sighed, shaking her head. Fine, but if we do this, we do it together. No secrets, no solo moves. Promise me. I promise, Ethan said softly, taking her hands in his. Whatever happens, I won't let you face this alone. The next day, Ethan arranged a meeting with Victor under the guise of discussing potential investments, a ruse designed to lure him into the open. When they arrived at the designated cafe, Victor was already seated, sipping coffee with an air of smug satisfaction. Well, Victor drawled as Ethan and Claire approached. To what do I owe the pleasure, Carter? We need to talk, Ethan said bluntly, sliding into the seat across from him. Claire sat beside him, her posture tense but resolute. Victor raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. About what? Business? Revenge? Oh, wait. His lips curled into a cruel smile. Let me guess. You finally realized I'm the one pulling the strings. You made your point? Ethan shot back, his voice steady despite the anger boiling inside him. You hate me. Fine. But dragging my family into this crosses a line. Victor chuckled darkly, leaning back in his chair. Your family? Please. You brought this on yourself the moment you chose greed over loyalty. Now here we are. Claire leaned forward, her voice sharp and unyielding. What do you want, Victor? Money? Power? Name your price and we'll end this. For a moment, Victor seemed taken aback by her directness. Then his smirk returned, colder and more menacing than before. Oh, it's not about money or power. It's about justice. About making sure everyone knows the truth about Ethan Carter, the man who built his empire on lies and betrayal. As Victor spoke, Ethan noticed something. A flash of movement behind him. A figure discreetly recording their conversation from a nearby table. It was Daniel, who had agreed to help them gather evidence without tipping off Victor. You'll regret this, Ethan warned, his voice low but laced with resolve. When people find out what you've done, how far you've gone to destroy me, they'll see you for what you really are, a coward. Victor laughed bitterly, rising from his seat. Go ahead, Ethan. Try to turn the tables. See where it gets you. With that, he walked away, leaving behind an oppressive silence. Later that night, as Ethan and Claire reviewed the footage Daniel had captured, they found what they needed. Subtle admissions, damning phrases that painted Victor as the architect of their nightmare. Armed with the evidence, they went straight to the authorities, ensuring Victor's arrest before he could carry out his threats. In the aftermath, as the dust began to settle, Ethan turned to Claire, his heart swelling with gratitude and love. We did it, he whispered, pulling her into his arms. Together, Claire rested her head against his chest, tears streaming down her face. Yes, But at what cost? Ethan kissed the top of her head, holding her tighter. Whatever it takes, Claire. As long as we have each other, we can rebuild. Start over. One morning, as Ethan sat in his home office reviewing legal documents with Claire by his side, his phone buzzed incessantly with notifications. He glanced at the screen, his stomach dropping when he saw headlines flashing across news outlets. Ethan Carter steps down as CEO amid scandal. The fall of a tycoon. Secrets, lies, and betrayal. What is this? Ethan muttered, clicking through article after article. His heart raced as he realized that someone, likely one of Victor's associates, had leaked information about his affair with Mia, along with details of the blackmail plot. The media frenzy was relentless, painting him as a man who had lost everything due to his own hubris. Claire read over his shoulder, her face pale but resolute. "They're tearing you apart," she whispered, her voice trembling with anger and sadness. "All of it, the affair, the scandal, even Victor's role. It's all out there now." Ethan slammed the phone down on the desk, frustration boiling over. "I thought we were done with this. I thought exposing Victor would end it." "It's not just about Victor anymore," Claire replied softly, placing a calming hand on his arm. "It's about how people see you, how they'll always see you. This isn't something we can fight. Not directly, anyway." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. For years, he had defined himself by his success, his power, his ability to command respect. But now, stripped of those things, he felt exposed, vulnerable in a way he hadn't anticipated. "So what do I do?" Ethan asked, his voice cracking under the weight of emotion. "How do I fix this? How do I protect us?" "You don't," Claire said firmly, meeting his gaze. "Not the way you're thinking, at least. You can't control what people say or think about you, Ethan. All you can control is how you respond. And right now, the best thing you can do, for me, for the baby, for yourself, is step away." "Step away," Ethan echoed, incredulous. "From everything? My company, my career, my life's work?" "Yes," Claire replied, her tone unwavering despite the tears welling up in her eyes. "Because if you don't, they'll keep coming for you. They'll twist every move you make, every decision you regret, until there's nothing left. Is that what you want? To spend the rest of your life fighting shadows while we lose each other in the process?" Ethan stared at her, the enormity of her words sinking in. She wasn't asking him to give up. She was asking him to choose, to prioritize their family over the empire he had built. It was a choice he never imagined making, yet one he knew deep down was inevitable. "I'll do it," he said finally, his voice steady despite the turmoil raging inside him. "For you, for us." The announcement came later that week. Ethan Carter, once hailed as a titan of industry, was stepping down as CEO of his company. The press conference was brief, devoid of excuses or justifications. Instead, Ethan spoke from the heart, addressing the world with raw honesty. "I made mistakes," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "Mistakes that hurt the people I love most. And while I can't undo the past, I can take responsibility for it. Today, I'm choosing to walk away, not because I've given up, but because I've realized what truly matters. My family, my future." As he stepped away from the podium, cameras flashing around him, he felt a strange sense of liberation. The weight of decades of ambition and expectation lifted slightly, replaced by the quiet resolve to rebuild. Not his empire, but his life. That evening, as Ethan and Claire sat together on the couch, the silence between them was heavy yet comforting. They didn't need words to convey the magnitude of what had transpired. Both knew the road ahead would be difficult, filled with judgment and uncertainty, but they also knew they were ready to face it, together. "What happens now?" Claire asked softly, breaking the stillness. "We start over," Ethan replied, taking her hand in his. "No more running, no more hiding. Just living, loving, building something real." Claire nodded slowly, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Then let's begin." In the weeks that followed, Ethan threw himself into projects far removed from the corporate world. He volunteered at local charities, mentored young entrepreneurs, and spent countless hours preparing for the arrival of their child. Each act of service, each moment shared with Claire, became a step toward redemption. A reminder that success wasn't measured in titles or wealth, but in connection and purpose. One crisp autumn morning, as golden sunlight streamed through the windows of their home, Ethan found Claire sitting in the nursery they had painstakingly decorated together. She was cradling their newborn daughter, Lily, in her arms, humming softly as she rocked back and forth. The sight filled Ethan with a warmth he hadn't known was possible. A sense of peace that came from knowing he was exactly where he belonged. "You're staring," Claire teased gently, glancing up at him with a smile. Her eyes sparkled with exhaustion and joy, a combination that made her more beautiful than ever. "Can you blame me?" Ethan replied, stepping into the room. "You look perfect." Claire laughed softly, shaking her head. "Hardly. I haven't slept in days, and I'm pretty sure there's spit up in my hair. But thank you." Ethan knelt beside her, gazing down at Lily, who was sleeping soundly, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. For a moment, neither of them spoke, content to simply exist in the quiet magic of the moment. "She's worth it, isn't she?" Claire asked after a while, her voice barely above a whisper. "All the sacrifices, all the pain. It led us here." Ethan nodded, brushing a stray strand of hair from Claire's face. "She is, and so are you." Claire met his gaze, her expression softening. "Do you think we'll be okay? Really okay?" "I do," Ethan replied without hesitation. "Not because everything's fixed, because it's not. We've got scars, both of us, but we're learning how to carry them, how to grow around them." His words resonated deeply, echoing the journey they had been on. Not just these past months, but throughout their entire marriage. They weren't the same people they had been before the scandal, before the betrayal. In some ways, they were stronger, more honest, more willing to fight for what mattered most. "And if things get hard again?" Claire pressed, searching his eyes for reassurance. "What then?" "Then we face it," Ethan said firmly, his voice steady despite the uncertainty ahead. "Together, no running, no hiding, just taking it one day at a time." Claire nodded slowly, leaning into him as he wrapped an arm around her. They sat like that for a long time, the three of them cocooned in the safety of their little world. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was theirs. Later that evening, as Ethan tucked Lily into her crib, he paused to watch her sleep. Her delicate features reminded him of Claire. The curve of her nose, the shape of her lips, but there was something uniquely hers too. A quiet strength, perhaps, or maybe just the promise of new beginnings. As he turned off the light and closed the door behind him, Claire appeared in the hallway, holding 2 cups of tea. She handed one to him, her smile warm and